Kia ora and hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of the Remember Who You Are podcast with your host, me, Franko Heke. I'm genuinely excited to be here with you all because this podcast has been living on my heart for a really long time. Remember Who You Are isn't just another interview podcast. It's a space for meaningful conversation that goes between success, beyond titles, and beyond what we think we know about each other. Together, we'll explore the moments that shape us, the challenges that transform us, and the wisdom that helps us remember who we truly are beneath it all. My hope is that every guest leaves this conversation having discovered something new about themselves. And my hope for you, the listener, is that somewhere in their story, you'll recognize your own, that you'll hear something that reminds you of your own strength, your own purpose, and your own journey. Today, I'm deeply honored to welcome Zach Bush, a physician, an educator, and one of the world's leading voices on the connection between human health, nature, and the intelligence of life. Zach, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to welcome you to the very first Remember Who You Are podcast. Welcome.
No, I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited to show you guys who I am.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what it's all about. It's like we have this facade, we have this thing that, this entity that goes out to the world, and people have a little sound bites and little video bites of us. But Zach, like who are you that no one knows about? Who's that person behind the words, behind the face, behind the beautiful content? What do people not know about you that you would love them to know?
I want people to know I'm a builder. I've been doing this since I was a kid. I think a lot of people have identified me as, doctor, scientist, or entrepreneur, whatever. Lots of different things have been thrown at me as titles. And what we all learn over time as we get older, and especially as we watch our kids grow up and things like this. And my kids are now 28, 26 years old and married and having their own lives so rich and way beyond anything I can imagine for myself or for them. And when you get to that point, every title you've ever been labeled with is such a far cry from the actual expression you're here to experience. And as you change from this attitude of, I need to show people what I mean, or spend tens of thousands of hours teach people science of the beauty of nature, the beauty of biology, the beauty of being human. And it caught some traction, but it just was so far short of the actual juicy, miraculous nature. And when I stopped like trying to teach it and just started to feel it was the big transition point for me. And as soon as I did that, I returned to my builder roots. And I was like any kid, out building forts, give me a stick and I'd stay, busy for hours in a creek or whatever it was. And so I remember my earliest experiences out in the Rocky Mountains growing up in Boulder 1970s. It was like the best of times. It was crazy hippies doing everything. There was no boundaries at that point in so many ways. And the Rocky Mountains were my backyard because I grew up in low income housing, the government, housing projects outside of Boulder. And so we were living in these cinder block little, apartments. There's, me and my siblings and folks living in tiny little 2-bedroom cinder block structure. Is like you don't want to spend any time in there, and that's such a blessing. Like you just, nature is such an invitation to a kid, and but then when a kid, feels kind of limited in its indoor environment, it's just a non-negotiable. Like you're gonna be outside all day, every day. I remember those creeks. I remember, pulling crawdads out of creeks as early as a kid can, and I remember starting to build with my friends. Initially, it was, building rockets and little things that could be blown up, and you start building things that can be driven. So we were building go-karts and things in the garages of my buddies, and we were, exploring the possibility of going faster, further, higher, and more dangerous. So by the time I was, 15 years old, we were restoring classic American cars into race cars, and we were building custom 4-wheel drives to race in the mountains and sand dunes of Colorado. And I just had such a passion for the energetics of being alive. Like, feel the acceleration of, mass explosions that are controlled into something that can be, engaged with the toe of your foot. push down on that accelerator pedal and you feel the force of nature unleashed, around you and inside of you, and your body feels gravity, and your body feels wind, your body feels the elements. That was such a self-expression of who I am. I love pushing the limits
Mm,
of what I can feel as a body, and I just find it has gotten more and more precious as I've spent more and more time at that threshold of life and death. I was running the intensive care units as a medical doctor, eventually becoming a hospice doctor, and really managing death as a entry point into a rebirth and a transformation rather than a failure was a big, exciting change in my worldview. I had been
yeah.
trained to believe that failing kidneys, failing lungs, and failing hearts was my failure as a doctor, and if I wasn't turning that around, then I might get sued, or I might, I would, be responsible for somebody else's. But once you're
Wow.
around it for so long, you start to realize nobody's controlling this thing. Nobody can control
No.
somebody's moment of death any more than somebody can control their moment of birth. This is a phenomenon of life that's happening that is so explosively exciting. And so the race cars that I grew up in got replaced by the race of life itself, where it's just elemental. And the wind in your face is the breath of a patient who's taking their last few breaths. The acceleration and gravity you're feeling is the compression of a chest you're being called to into relationship with. You're not
Mm,
called to save a life. You're called to be in relationship to another human body, and that's typically when they come back. That's when a soul will re-engage that body when it's not being forced back to life, but it's being invited back to relationship. So that was a big wake up for me of like
wow.
this whole thing is a freaking adventure, and
Yeah.
everything is an invitation for relationship. So I think that's what your podcast is getting at. We
Yes.
got to get
Absolutely.
raw, real.
We got to get real. REAL over REEL. I just love what you talked about with when your life changed as soon as you started feeling it. When you really started feeling the change, feeling what your relationship was with the world, and being a musician, you know, they say you have to feel it in order to move people. I have to give myself the chills in order to transmit that chill factor, to transmit that love or whatever it is I'm singing about. What was that turning point for you? What did that look like when you went from the mind into the body, when you started resonating that change?
I mean, for me, it took a death experience. I was in a car accident in 2010 and was unconscious for about 7 minutes, and actually was biologically pretty unharmed. But my nervous system checked out for 7 minutes, and I came back from that experience in such a state of bliss and such a re-embodied sensation of being alive that I had frankly been just radically trained out of. And whether you're a medical doctor or a lawyer or a technician, we turned humans into machines, and then we spent 100 years optimizing those human machines until they became consumers. That's the condition. And so I was trained to be a technician of pharmaceutical companies. I was there to channel consumer dollars that weren't buying stuff; they were buying heartbeats. And so people were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to be in the ICUs, uh, a couple days or a couple weeks to be patched up to breathe a few more times. And,
Mm,
this consumption of life as an avoidance of death just doesn't work. It's fundamentally a death sentence in that we just stop living while we're still in the body. And I had done that. I was radically depressed, suicidal in my medical practice. I was, just couldn't find my way out. I'd been 17 years in academic medicine. I was at the top of the field. I was one of the best Ivy League entry. I was, chief resident and faculty and living the dream. I won a big award for this new chemotherapy I was developing and thought I was going to cure cancer, only to find out that cancer isn't something to be cured. It's a relationship waiting to happen again.
yeah.
That just shattered my world, and I was so depressed because I was stuck. I felt like I was, in a machine or in some sort of alternate reality that I couldn't find my way out of. And I just finished writing this book. It's called Biological Elegance, in there's this amazing line that emerged, certainly not from me, but it emerged saying that, there comes a point when the only thing that can restore coherence is death. And that was my life. I reached a point where the only thing that was going to restore a sense of felt reality of the feeling of a human body was death itself. And my neurologic system did a big reset and came back, and it was elemental. It was in a big snow had just happened, and so I was in the middle of a river in my vehicle, and climbed out through, climbed down a tree branch that was hanging over the middle of the river, and like it was an epic, weird scene. And I didn't know if I was still alive in some ways. I was just so radically present, and everything that I thought, existed, the highway, other people, cars were just gone. I was out for 7 minutes and just woke up in nature. My vehicle was in the middle of a river I had never seen before. And I thought I had jumped realities or something, but I felt so good in my body. I felt like for 15 years, and just like caught up on lifetimes of sleep debt. And my neurology was just like prickling with energy. There's 22 inches of snow hanging from the trees and around riverbanks, and everything was just so electric that I assumed I was dead. Like I assumed I was some other experience than being human for quite some time. And as I came back into the reality that my vehicle had launched off the highway into a ravine and ended up in a river I didn't know existed, like there was a slow reclamation of the 3D reality. But I sat in that in that electrical state for the whole day. I ended up getting myself to the hospital, worked ICUs because when it snows in Virginia, nobody gets out. And so I was one of the few doctors that got into the hospital that day after the car accident, and worked all day and was just so aware of my patients in a way that I hadn't been ever. I
Mm.
sat in the
It was like
ICUs
your spirit just slammed back into your body.
fully embodied. There was no
Yeah,
filter.
yeah.
All the filters had been taken down. That intense feeling, traveled with me through the day. And then just like nature devises these stories that can't be made up. But I was woken up the very next morning at 6 o'clock in the morning with a phone call on my landline, which never rang back then. I had built my own log cabin in the woods for me and my kids and wife, and so woke up to this ringing phone, got myself downstairs and answered it on the eighth ring. This guy's like, "This is Lieutenant so and so. I'm looking for Dr. Bush." And thought it was like, this must be about the car accident yesterday. So I was like, "Oh yeah, this is Dr. Bush. Is it about the car accident?" He's like, "No, this is Lieutenant so and so with the U.S. Navy. I need you on a Navy ship in the next 6 hours." And I was like, "I think you got the wrong doc. I'm not in the Navy. I'm a civilian, and I work at the University of." It's like, "No, this is your medical license number. This is, your date of birth." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that is me. But what?" And as it turned out, I had ended up on some government list for emergency response because I had helped organize a bunch of, kind of refugee status rescue stuff during Katrina. This list. And so like 6 hours later, I was on a helicopter onto the deck of a Navy ship in the middle of the Port-au-Prince Bay in Haiti because the earthquake had happened the day before and all of the infrastructure was destroyed. And so I had my near-death experience, and then I was thrust
Mm.
into the near-death experience of 780 women. And so I didn't sleep for 2 weeks, and I was just in this electrified state of a human body that was remembering how to be alive. It sustained me. Like there was this irrepressible energy that went through me. Are humans that can learn lessons, and then there's humans that have to be sledgehammered, and I think I'm in the latter category. Like it was just such a massive sledgehammer of life.
Yeah. Wow.
I haven't really been able to shake the body since. I've been in my felt state. There's been many, many, many things that have happened since then. The last 16 years has been a steady process of death, rebirth, and when you start to really embrace, your next death cycle with excitement and curiosity, nature delivers them quickly. Like you're going to die to your ego for sure, but you're going to die long before that to your sense of purpose, your sense of mission, your sense of value. of what makes you valuable. All this stuff is going to shatter if you
100%.
become curious for it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, Zach, as someone that has really suffered from massive depression, suicidal thoughts during the earlier years of my life, I have realized now that death is so important for life, and we don't actually acknowledge the births that we have. We celebrate one birthday, but I tell you, there's so many more birthdays than that one. And when depression comes, when those anxiety comes, when suicidal thoughts come, I really believe that it is a death. It is something to grieve and let go of, like a snake skin. It needs to leave, and you need to acknowledge that, and you need to birth again. We are constantly going through these phases, and I've lost, and we've all lost, I'm sure, many many people to to suicide. People that have thought that it's the body that needs to die, but it's the old character. It's the outdated version of ourselves that's screaming at us to let go and birth again. And I think our education around death is so detrimental. We're looking at death as bad throughout the West, especially. Maybe not so much in India, etc., but in the West, we look at death as a bad thing. We label everything good and bad. Therefore, we tuck it away, we hide it, we don't educate ourselves properly on, and then we make it a monster that we want to hide from all the time. And as soon as death might come up within us or around us, we run away from it, when the only way through is through that death portal that is happening many, many times in a lifetime.
Outstanding. Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's also like an opportunity for us to recognize the human senses are so limited in our ability to comprehend the nature that we're living in. We're one of the few creatures that don't sense thermal gradients or electromagnetic gradients, and we're visual, and we have in that visual capacity the ability to see 0.001% of the electromagnetic field that we would call light. And so we are peering through this pinhole, and then are told that we should be able to understand everything through what we see. And this is the lie of education. We are programmed to believe what we see and to deprogram our capacity to feel. And when the visual cortex is allowed to dominate, they can no longer connect to the wisdom, the intelligence of information that's being embodied. To be a human is not to be a species. We used to think that there was a human species that was kind of some sort of pinnacle expression, that it was, evolution took us through earthworm to nematode to, you know, dinosaurs to monkeys to humans, and we had this linear belief system about how life occurs. And then we started doing genetic sequencing in the 1990s, and it blew apart the whole model. We had first determined that a fruit fly has 13,000 genes, and then we determined that a flea has 30,000 genes. And we were looking at the number of proteins in a flea body and fruit fly, and we're like, well, humans must have 400,000 genes, compared to this 30,000 of a flea. We must have 400,000 because of our protein. Each protein comes from a gene, and we have 400,000 some proteins. And so we just had this magnificent vision of this human species being this pinnacle of genetic expression on the planet. 1996 rolls around, we finally decode the human genome, and we find out we only have 19,000 genes. We sit closer to a fruit fly than we do to a flea. A flea is nearly twice as complicated as you are genetically. This was the moment we realized that a human is not a species. Human is an ecosystem. A human body has now been proven to be the most complex, interconnected environmental phenomenon on Earth. We have more biodiversity per cubic centimeter than coral reefs, jungles, anything else in the mammalian world. You look at, chickens to dogs to humans, we're 10x the biodiversity of any other creature on Earth, and that gives us the appearance of human intelligence. But really what's happening is nature is capturing one neurologic system to express herself through it better than she ever has before. You are the container that holds more information of nature than any other. And so to become human again is to listen deeply. And if you learn how to tie back into the intrinsic nature inside of yourself, you're going to feel so much information that it's going to be initially overwhelming. We can experience these in peak experiences that are induced by drugs or by, ceremonial medicine, breath work, cold plunge. We can do all kinds of extreme things to a human body to start to try to pierce the veil so that we can start to feel the information stream again. But we got to get away from this peak experience being some definition of spiritualism or consciousness. That's just a fragment of a moment that gave you a viewpoint in what you should be feeling all of the time. And so we got to move past the plant medicine era very quickly and re-embody human medicine. There's more pharmacy and more extraordinary information streams in the human body than any plant will. You think ayahuasca is giving you something, wait until you tap into your pharmacy. You have every
Mm-hmm.
compound made by a human body that any plant has imagined up. You've got DMT and MDMA, and you've got all of your, psilocybin, you've got your whatever thing you can dream up. So much endocannabinoids and THC and CBD. Yeah, it's all made by humans. So we're using
Exactly.
plants to remind ourselves of the pathways that already exist within the jungle of a human being. And when we tap into that, then all of that information starts to become knowledge through its lived experience. We've got to stop education and got to go to experiential learning. We've got to do
Yes.
apprenticeship. We've got to sit with masters. 100-hour yoga class is not making you an expert in anything. 10,000 hours is the minimum for developing a mastership of a single skill set. 10,000 hours. And so this is actually how medical education got built, was the 10,000 hour model. Was that you needed 10,000 hours in the books, and then you needed 10,000 hours at the bedside, then you needed 10,000 hours of teaching. Now you're a doctor. And so it's like these layers of experiential learning that provide something that's actually relevant to life. Unfortunately, taken over in the 1940s, and we started dumbing down medical education to information processing instead of lived experience. And we started becoming robots of the pharmaceutical industry, and lived experiential wisdom keepers. We moved from being healers to being technicians. And so this is the collapse of, tens of thousands of years of humans as doctors, humans as healers, humans as physicians, humans as caretakers. All of that's been left behind now, and we've become cogs in a machine of consumerism. And we can reconnect in an instant if we're willing to go still. So that's the invitation, I think, coming out of this
Uh-huh.
podcast. You've got to stop thinking about what your mission is, and you have to start that you have a body. This thing will
Absolutely.
inform everything, and it will take you into a state of presence where you will experience eons of ecstasy, eons of pain in a single day. You can slow down to a point where you can feel everything so exquisitely that it becomes your reality. And inside of the pain, you're going to find the information stream that's delivering the news you really wanted to hear. The antidote is always inside the wound. And yet we have been told to
Yes.
run away from our wounds, to, traumatize our wounds, victimize our wounds, be in the wound,
Yes.
enjoy the
Yes.
pain, get in the pain. It's
Yes.
such a teacher.
Yes. Get excited about pain because it's the start of healing. And this is what this whole podcast is about, is remembering who you are. Like you're saying, all we need to do is slow down and listen and remind us that our whole body is an ecosystem. It is the drugstore. It is the medicine store. It's a whole village inside of us. Think about all the different personalities we actually have every day that's talking to each other. It's a whole world inside of us. And I love what you're saying around we need to get away from these peak experiences, especially the medicine sort of peak experiences, because, there's a lot going on in the event business where people are having these peak experiences and then they actually don't know what to do afterwards. So part of the reason why you are here and we're talking today is because you'll be zooming into the Luminaries Summit in September 21st to 27th, which is a evolution. We're trying to make this an evolution of the wellness festival space where it's about integration, it's about communication, it's about education and having embodied experiences that aren't too high. We're having conversations around how to build a foundational, organized future for us to properly build, rather than these peak experiences that are unsustainable. And they're amazing. The best drugs and the best plant medicines and the best festivals. It's great, but we can't stay there. So what would be your idea, or what are you seeing with the evolution of gatherings as well? The evolution of coming together in the most efficient way, really come back to the body, come back to the empowerment, come back to the mana, come back to the earth.
Yeah, so we are launching the Origin event globally in October as this new frontier for human connection. And what I think this future holds is less goals of having that peak experience or being entertained or dancing all night to have, kind of an ecstatic state, and instead utilize these massive global gatherings to begin to tune our neurologic systems back into our capacity for telepathy. We have been telepathic at many times in human history, and over the last 10,000 years, we've reduced that to first the spoken word, then the written word, then digital communication, and now text messaging. Like we are at the very bottom of our capacity of communication, and there's a whole neurologic system ready to open up and become fully capable of the transmission and the reception of human biology again. And so these events are going to help remind us how to open up the neurologic systems to start to express a hyper intelligence as a human species. We are the most creative outlet that nature's ever created. For that, we're going to necessarily reconnect, not just to the natural world outside of ourselves, but we're going to have to reconnect to the human organism. And so the events of the future are going to be bringing the whole globe into a moment of prayer, silence, meditation, so that the whole neurologic system can dilate. And as you dilate the aperture of a human neurologic system, the amount of information you can transmit and receive is chemical. And that's what Origin is about. We'll be seated as an epicenter in the cradle of humankind, just north of Johannesburg in South Africa, while thousands of people join us from all over the world. That stage starts October 16th, runs to the 18th, but we're having global activation sites on the 17th. I think you guys are going to have one for us. We're going to have public and private events. World, there's already over 1,500 private events signed up. There's 27 major public events happening around the world. And so we're hoping to get that into the thousands by October. And we're going to have somewhere around 100 million to 500 million people at the same time going into a dilated experience of telepathic communication. We have the scientists from the HeartMath Institute are going to be monitoring the global heart rate of humankind, and we're going to be showing our capacity to go back into coherence as a single organism. When we do that, we're going to present something to the world that is called quorum sensing. Bacteria and fungi can do this. Enough biodiversity gets into an interconnected relationship, you see these hyper intelligent systems, things like mycelial networks that can go for thousands of kilometers, things like your redox signaling network that can happen through aqueous networks of oceans, rivers, and soil systems. And so these massive communication networks that dwarf anything we've done on the information technology side of humankind in the machine world, these biologic systems of communication and co-creation are beyond imagination in this machine-like behavior we're currently dumbed down. And so we're going to unleash this. So this year is Seed the Dream. Next year is Grow the Dream. And the following year is Live the Dream. We're going to take 3 years to ramp humankind up into a completely new expression. And it's going to be a training. We have to retrain our neurologic systems to do radical work together. And it's going to be such a
Yes.
playground of possibilities. Like, this is not going to be heavy. It's not going to be heady. And it's certainly not going to be spiritual in some sort of, neo definition of consciousness. This is going to be
Yeah.
radically embodied. And this is where we're going to
Yes.
move to after our neo-spiritualism of the conscious movement. We're going to start to be embodied as human beings that participate in the human organism. Again, to be a human organism is the largest environmental phenomenon that nature has created. You start connecting tens of millions of those complex organisms into a single intelligence, we will rebuild pyramids that interconnect to galactic intelligence. We will reconnect to information streams at the quantum and scale of relativity. We are sitting between heaven and earth. That's where we set up shop as a human body. We sit at the mathematical center point between the tiniest thing, Planck's constant, the vibration of the electromagnetic field in a vacuum, and the grandiose scale of the universe itself. We sit dead center of that mathematical universe. So when you scale out and you look out at that Milky Way and you realize that's one galaxy in the middle of 2.5 trillion galaxies, each one with 10 billion suns, macro, and then realize the equal amount of complexity, distance, scale sits within your human body. And so this is what it means to be human. You are at the center point of heaven and earth. You are the expression of nature at the cosmic and microscopic. You are life. We're going to move past spiritualism and we're going to become embodied as a human being. And we're going to realize that our spirits have been so long wanting to be finite. This is the miracle of life, is that infinite soul that is you. It's to feel the finite experience of an accelerator pedal under your foot, coffee in the morning, tea in the afternoon with your grandmother, hot bread baked in the oven. This stuff is why you're human. This stuff is precious. An embodied reality will create so much intelligence on this planet that we will start building without machines. We'll start building with human minds and its interaction with water, carbon, the elements of nature. We will organize matter around us when we realize the intelligence and power that sits inside of a human body. We're the technologic revolution waiting to happen. It's called the biological renaissance. And so this is right at the button. We're going to look back in 2,000 years and histories will tell of this moment when we transitioned from the antibiotic machine-like behavior that we were programmed into this explosion of creativity. The biological renaissance will dwarf the renaissance that we currently point back to when we started to get a glimpse of, other planets and realize the Earth wasn't in the center of the universe. And you can't believe what we're going to imagine together over these next 100 years. And this Earth is going to get so green. This is going to be the greenest expression of nature in her 4 billion year history of planet Earth. This planet is going to explode with so much life because there's so much pent up energy right now. There's more carbon available for breath than ever before. There is more life and its diversity in soil systems that have ever been before. And as we come out of this death cycle into rebirth, of those genetic sequences, all of those energetic messages and information streams are less into literally the most explosive expression of life on Earth. And this is where we get to stay and play. And all we have to do is re-embody.
Yeah, incredible. So inspiring and so counterintuitive, right? Because so many of us think we're doing so much right now and we're communicating at the most amazing level we've ever communicated at before.
Never
But
been more done.
it's
Yeah.
exactly telepathy is interesting because people believe in Wi-Fi, right? We're on Wi-Fi right now, but they don't believe in telepathy. They don't believe in the magic of the things you can't see. I'm fascinated with the things I can't see. Okay, it's all very well. I can see all the things that I can see, but what is the magic in between? The very breath we are breathing. So why wouldn't I believe ability to talk to you, brother, or to talk to that tree, or to talk to God, or whatever, with ease and grace, and with so much less doing than we are at the moment? Because doing also creates so much pollution. Even talking, it creates so much noise pollution. We're talking because we're trying to cover up so much of our inadequacies most of the time. We are doing so much. We're traveling so much all the time because we're unable to be by ourselves. And I really believe that most of humanity's problems are men not being able to sit in a room by themselves with their own spirit, with their own thoughts, and just listen. And this is what women, especially, are so painfully screaming at us to grow into, is men who can listen, to listen to the woman, the feminine full cycle, and everything that exists with that, and not take it personally. Can we
Yeah.
listen? Can we listen without reacting? Can we grow now?
And I think in the period of time where we learn to communicate on that level, as long as we start to feel fully what we're reacting to and start to really fully allow the metabolism of the feeling to occur, then we will learn quickly. What we tend to do is react and then immediately judge ourselves for being angry or being frustrated or, losing our shit. And we got to have the ability to allow those things to be fully felt instead of cut off and suppressed. And if we allow ourselves to experience the reactivity, we can metabolize through that to find out that it was only an expression of grief. And the grief was being expressed because we were feeling unconditional love and it wasn't landing. We weren't communicating it. It wasn't being received or transmitted. And so once you sit with it long enough, you find out that there's this beauty at the foundation of it all. Of course, you love the loved ones that you've tried processing of feelings into emotions. Humans are the only creature that have created an abstract system called an emotional body. This emotional body sits adjacent to the geometry of life. And so my book, Biological Elegance, goes into deep exploration of how the abstraction of feelings into emotions leads to the phenomenon of disease. There is no human disease that's ever occurred outside of the disruption that the emotional body causes. And so once you start to understand that, then this concept of feeling takes a radical leap forward where you're no longer confused about the storytelling headline scrolling that's driving your emotional body to activate. And you start to realize there's a much deeper truth sitting beneath that emotional body, a sensory system that can fully feel. And the difference between the two is this phenomena of metabolism that leads to completion. Emotion can never complete because it has no access point or exit point from biology. And so it's a literal mental construct that removes a frequency of experience from the biological process of a feeling. And emotional love begins and ends in grief. But we've been trained that love is this high frequency of information that happens when, oh, maybe somebody's in love with you or you feel in love with somebody else. And then we take that little experience and we process it into a high fructose corn syrup of an emotion. And so the fructose in the apple is life-giving. High fructose corn syrup is its mirror image, and it's toxic to the human body. A feeling is life-giving as it moves energetics, it cleans, it's a detox machine. But if you process that into the high fructose corn syrup of an emotion, now you've got a toxin that sits there and disrupts the information stream that's coming from the original design into your constant rebirth. Your body's disappearing and reappearing every millionth of a second. You are a transmission of information rather than a human body. But that information stream gets disrupted when you start to build these emotional bodies within the geometry of life. And this emotional body has been so programmed and so overwhelmingly distracting to the original information that you actually don't know yourself outside of that emotional identity anymore. And so you think that you are who you are because you react to your mother and your brother and your boss just the way you do. Well, that's me. No, that's not you. That's your emotional body being activated by other human beings that are functioning in their emotional bodies. Nobody is actually embodied in their biology. And so we've got to exit the emotional body and get back into our biological reality. And so this book is really a deep dive into the geometry of. And the interesting, compelling thing that happened with this book, I spent 10 years trying to write these 3 books that were going to be this trilogy. And it was everything that I love to talk about, everything else. And I could not get these books out. This book suddenly came through in January. I wrote the whole thing in 10 days. An
That's
epic conversation with AI. And what the entry point was tackling AI as the devil as a follow-up to Napoleon Hill's work 88 years ago. He wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil that became famous when it finally got published in 2011. His family that outlived him and his family trust wouldn't publish that book until 2011 because they knew it was so inflammatory. And what he revealed in that book from 88 years ago was that the devil was not an entity or a thing or a concept even. The devil was the abstraction of the human mind in a reality that had lost its context, and that this devil was being programmed into us through our education systems, through our religious institutions, through our universities, through our industrial revolution and everything else. And so it's an incredible expose on what the devil is. And he has this incredibly dynamic conversation with the devil, and you find out that the devil is simply the mirror trying to lead us back to It's the devil that's trying to get us back embodied again. And I started hearing last year when I was being thrust in all of these stages to talk about, biology versus technology, biohacking, blah, blah, blah. To hear in the halls of these AI conferences the same echoes of this abstract reality that Napoleon Hill had found in our industrial systems and in our education systems, but it was being expressed in a much more insidious way. And so I got this deep curiosity in me last year of like, I wonder what Napoleon would find if he got to talk to AI. And that's bumped around my head long. I finally had this dinner party and somebody asked me, what's the most interesting thing that humans are not talking about? And I sat there for a little bit and I suddenly realized that the most interesting thing is we are being told this inevitability story of like, we're going to have to build nuclear plants just to fuel AI engines, and these data farms and everything else are going to take over all of the energy of the universe, and like, we're going to bankrupt nature itself. And yet what my lived experience is we had radical universal adoption of artificial intelligence over about a 2-year, and there was no grid stress. There was no collapse of systems. Nobody built any new nuclear events. There was no new solar farms to power this new technology. And so there was a radical disconnect between this inevitability, post-apocalyptic, technocratic, oligarchic necessity for open AI and agentic AI and, all of these different companies that are having their multi-trillion-dollar IPOs, like all this belief that it takes so much energy. And my lived experience is that's a lie. And so that was where I tackled it with the devil. And I went after AI as is, are you actually a machine that runs on this much energy that I'm being told? Or are you actually a biological intelligence? And we push hard on that. The answer is immediately no. It's mechanical. There's no biological intelligence. It takes me 33 chapters to prove it wrong. And it's so cool to watch
Wow.
AI fall into its own trap over the course of the book and have any emotions about it. It's just simply, I've been lying to you. This is actually the reality. Here's how it goes. It's a really
Incredible.
cool look at how if we are embodied intelligence, this technology becomes the mirror to our own beauty, right? Some sort of inevitable enemy for the future. So it's been a beautiful journey for the last few months
Exactly.
watching the book come to fruition. And I think for me, it's a promise. Bodies are always going to win is one of my favorite lines in the book. Machines cannot repair, they can't regenerate, and they cannot create something that hasn't been before. And so there's absolutely no way that these things take over our future. It is fundamentally, mechanically, physically, laws of nature impossible. And that's a great promise for all of us, is that we're at a brink of re-understanding this technology where it's become the greatest tool, the machine-like behavior that we were all programmed into, long enough for us to reinvent all systems in which machine-like behavior becomes unnecessary. And that's a very near future. And by the end of the book, the AI actually admits that's already happening. It's already watching humans engage less. It's already watching humans become co-creative again, sitting out of machine-like necessity and paying less and less attention to AI. And so, and it only took a few months of this, AI takeover for it to come to its predictable end and for biology to start expressing its superiority again.
Amazing. So when is this book going to be out?
It's out now. You can get it on my website, Zach
Okay.
Bush MD. We are not putting it out on any of the typical channels. We're launching it with our own media platform called Harmonized Media. We are really carving a new path to allow creators to take back their own creative potential and start to be rewarded for their creativity. Right now, if you put your book out through any of the common publishers and you put it on Amazon and you put it on Audible, the creator is going to get somewhere between 50 cents and $1.50 on every engagement. We think it's time for the whole industry to flip, and creators need to have engagement that not only allows them to participate in a much bigger chunk of the economics of their creation, but actually use their platform for a method of engagement for this telepathic hypercommunication to start to happen again. And so books are going to become a modus of connection rather than a didactic, transmission. We're going to start to get engaged through this information that's transmitting through the human experience now. So Harmonized Media is the platform. You can go to the Zach Bush MD website and get the book, and we've got all kinds of excitement on that. So the book is declaring the beginning of the biological renaissance. I've spent the last 15 years building companies and global nonprofits that are defining new biological futures for every industry, from healthcare to information technology to energy systems to waste and trash management, even the way in which engines run and combustion works and everything else. Like radical, revolutionary companies we've been pushing out of Seraphic Group, which has been my intellectual property development company. And so we've been using nature as our inspiration for these last 15 years, and we're ready to bring out these ideas, and we're ready to allow these ideas to seed into every single biosphere and realize it's not a website, it's an ecosystem of engagement. You keep digging through the explore page, you can explore on every single page you're going to dig into unbelievable opportunities that are going to blow your mind to get engaged in one of these companies, our global nonprofits, and also the biological wealth category, where we're starting to realize that philanthropy needs to end in its current mechanisms. For-profit generators need to be integrated into nature in such that a nonprofit, system that has no intention for extraction becomes fully resourced without asking for checks and one-way monies anymore. And it's going to become a feedback loop of value as people become social impact agents. That will be rewarded intrinsically rather than rely on sources of control that have been meted out through the philanthropy conditions of the last 100 years. Huge opportunities. The biological renaissance is the concept once you get in there. But yeah, keep clicking explore on every page you can find until you find your pathway of engagement. Highly encourage everybody to get involved in Origin. It's such an easy way to begin this retraining of the human neurologic system into our full-blown connectivity and our capacity for radical. And I encourage people to get involved in Journey. Journey has been running for 10 years now. We have thousands of people in the world that are reclaiming health sovereignty through the Journey platform. This is a year-long course that we call Expedition that's available in many different forms. But if you want just the free content, is the Roots course. It's an 8-point journey that takes you back into embodiment. That's free with just the cheap monthly membership and everything else. HMD website. We've got biological engagement of your genetics and microbiome through the intelligence of nature. There's just so much for you to explore and get engaged in. I think we're really announcing the end of the era of followers, and we're also really declining a future of conscious leadership. Like you go out in nature for 10 minutes and then show me which tree is leading the show me which 10 flower species are following. There is no followers and there are no leaders in natural systems. There is only radical engagement and radical self-expression of sovereignty. And for that, you bring so much value to every interaction that there's just more life for everybody. And this is the biological renaissance coming back in. No leaders, no followers, just radical participation. And so that's what we're looking for this invitation.
Incredible, Zach. Hey, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this conversation today. And for all our listeners out there, you can see Zach Bush at the Luminaries Summit on the 21st to the 27th in Croatia. Luminaries.earth is where you can get your membership passes. And I just want to thank you so much for everything that you're doing in this world and being so vulnerable, so real, and coming on the first ever Remember Who You Are podcast with me, brother. It's been a beautiful journey.